So I resigned in protest from my position in Afghanistan 2009, September 2009. In October of 2009, I spoke with the Washington Post. I had at that point had just wanted basically the Washington Post to write an op-ed. I wanted to write an op-ed in the Washington Post about why I resigned, and because people remember back in the fall of '09, this was a big conversation in the U.S. about escalating the war in Afghanistan. Obama had already done it. Actually, under Bush, they had begun escalating the American part of the war in 2008, actually. But Obama really escalates it, sends tens and tens of thousands of troops as soon as he gets into office. So by the time the fall of 2000 comes around, Obama has sent somewhere between 30 and 40,000 U.S. forces already to Afghanistan, as well as NATO forces and a ton more contractors, et cetera. So this conversation in fall of '09 is really about the second half of the escalation, and that's one of the things that I saw missing in this conversation back when I was back in the States after I came back from Afghanistan was just the context, the accuracy, the fact that, look, they've already escalated this war. What are you talking about a surge? We've already sent 30 to 40,000 troops there in the last 6 months, or last 9 months, I should say. And like just those things being left out. And so that's what I wanted to write an op-ed for, and the Post ends up writing this big expose on me, and I end up on the Today Show and Fareed Zakaria with Judy Woodruff, et cetera, et cetera. I say all that just to give people background so they understand how I ended up being in front of Congress and with members of Congress a lot. One thing that had happened when I was in Afghanistan was a CODEL came through. CODEL is congressional delegation, and sometimes it's members of Congress, sometimes it's staffers, sometimes it's both. This time it was a group of staffers, and I'm on my provincial reconstruction team down in Zabul province, which is in the southeast next to Kandahar, and I get a phone call basically to set up a conference call with these members of this congressional delegation, and what I'm told is they want to speak to me as well as my counterpart, myself and this Air Force officer led this provincial reconstruction team, and my counterpart in Kabul is calling us to set up this conversation with this CODEL because this CODEL had come through, the staff delegation really is a staff del, I guess is what you call it. The staff delegation had come through, and these guys were adamant that they didn't want to hear the same tired things. They have been given the typical dog and pony show, taken to the Potemkin villages, given the whole, the spiel, the standard VIP treatment. They have been fed the lies of the war, and these guys are smart enough to know better. And at that point, it was well known that I had a big mouth as well as my counterpart in the Air Force. And so the people in Kabul said, well, if you want to hear differently, talk to these guys. And that's what we did. We told them exactly what was happening. So fast forward a few months later, and my story comes out in the Post, and this is just a way of explaining how I get the attention of John Murtha. John Murtha, who had been a Marine officer of the Vietnam War, who had broke with the Bush administration early on in the Iraq War, was one of the first supporters of the Iraq War to turn against it, was very public in that denunciation of the war, and he was strongly opposed to the Afghan escalation. And one of his staff members, I can't remember his name, says to him, hey, sir, remember when I was in Afghanistan a few months ago, and I came back and I told you we talked to these guys who were saying stuff that we knew were true, but no one else would say. This is one of those guys, and so Murtha says, get him in here. So I end up going in. Murtha brings me into all aspects of Congress. And unfortunately, Murtha passed away in December of that year from complications after surgery. And I think quite possibly, if he had lived, things may have gone differently with the war in Afghanistan. Just to give you the level of prominence, he brings me in. He is at that point chair of the House Appropriations Committee for Defense. So this is a very serious person. And he brings me, he assembles the entire House Appropriations Subcommittee for Defense and has me talk to them, all 26 or 28 members, right? There. Like the type of audience that you normally don't get, particularly if you're not a lobbyist for a corporation that is donating millions or tens of millions of dollars throughout the political system every year. He then has me come in, and this is where the first villain emerges. He then has me come in and address the entire House Democratic Caucus. And this this is maybe the second or third week of November of 2009. And so I'm in the Capitol building, in the basement of the Capitol building, and sitting in front of me, I'm supposed to debate Ike Skelton, who is the chair of the House Armed Services Committee at the time. They brought in this woman from the Brookings Institute to argue against me, and it was Murtha and I. We're supposed to have like this panel discussion in front of the whole House Democratic Caucus. So there's like 200 Democratic House members sitting in front of me, and very surreal. You're in this basement conference room, this big room, and they're all sitting on these folding chairs with sandwiches on their laps that they had made. It's not what you think being in front of Congress is going to look like, right? It looked like you're basically attending like some church gathering at the fire station or something like that, So, but anyway, Murtha and I say our piece, and the caucus erupts. I mean, I'm not kidding. I mean, they were lined up 8 or 10 deep. They had like 2 microphones set up, and they were lined up 8 or 10 deep to denounce the war. This is November 2009, saying this is exactly what happened in Iraq. This is exactly what happened in Vietnam. We cannot go through this. We have to stand up to the president. And I don't know, maybe 10 or 12 of them say this before, and here's the first villain, before a hand pops up from the center of the crowd, and up pops the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. And Nancy Pelosi says, you have to remember who is the leader of this party, what our priorities are, and where we belong in ensuring those priorities are met. And what she was talking about, and then she went on to specify this, but the House had just passed a part of the Affordable Care Act. I think, it wouldn't be until March or so that I think that it was finally passed, but one of the early key pieces of legislation for the Affordable Care Act was passed at that point. And Nancy Pelosi basically saying, I know how you feel. I agree with you, but we cannot box the president in. We have to give all the support we can right now to the president because this is his priority, referring to the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare. And so no matter how we feel about this war, no matter how, to paraphrase, or how wrong this war is, how much mistake this is, how much we know better, we have to go along with the president. And with that, all debate ended, all discussion ended, the uproar diminished and was extinguished, and that was it. And we would not have another sizable presence within the Congress from the Democrats until after summer of 2011, when the Obama administration begins its withdrawal of forces from Afghanistan. Because remember, Obama goes to West Point in 2009, gives his speech at West Point, says, the surge is going to be 18 months, the troops are going to come home. So by middle of 2011, the troops start coming home. At that point, the White House signals to its people in Congress that, yes, now please start supporting withdrawal. And with that, at that point, you start seeing support for a withdrawal from Afghanistan really speed up. It had sort of begun in 2010, but anyway, the point being, Kyle, is that seeing Speaker Pelosi in action like that, how she controlled the caucus, being with John Murtha, he died about a month later or so. He was angry. He wanted to basically stage a revolt, from what I could tell. He wanted to, this would be the cross he would die on, so to speak. And the villainy of choosing a priority, a domestic political priority like the Affordable Care Act over the war, the argument that you can't have both, and that the priority of the ACA dominates the death, the suffering, the killing in Afghanistan, the potential for increased instability, the potential for increased chaos. I mean, at the same time, too, this signals the Obama administration they can do whatever they want in Afghanistan or throughout the world, right? And so then you see what happens with Libya, you see what happens with Syria, and finally it rested a bit in 2013 when the Obama administration tries to begin a war in Syria. over those supposed chemical weapons attacks. But, you know, from 2009 to 2013, the Obama administration basically has a free hand to expand the wars as it chooses. And I mean, there's a lot more to it, but I personally saw how that was afforded to the Obama administration, how the House gave up its responsibilities for the president's domestic political party, and without even making the argument that you could do both, right? It was just the slavishness, the loyalty, the obedience, the allegiance, you know. So I put the whole House Democratic caucus, you know, in this cast of villains.